welcome to the Edge. The Edge, we used to do this, first of all, it was once a week, then it was every 2 weeks, and we now do it once a month on the second Wednesday of every month, and it's 6 to 6:45. Really fast, looking at different tips that we can give you for business. And the whole reason that I do this is so people can get to see how I work, because I do one-to-one coaching, I do training, and it's just giving people a chance to meet me and see the different way that we do business. So each of these sessions, we're picking challenges, certain things that happen around communication and behaviour and language. That's the three main areas that I work in under the banner of NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And I like to give 3 actionable tips in this. We do go into breakout rooms, and we normally do a 7-minute breakout room, so you can get a chance to say hello to people in the room. So let me get started. Okay, today it's speaking their language, how to connect using the VAK AD Communication Model. We hear a lot about the VAK communication model, but a lot of times people forget to talk about the other part, which is really significant in business, which is the auditory digital part of this model. So the only way we can make sense of the world and can communicate with each other is through our senses. According to the VAK communication model, most people will possess a dominant or preferred learning style. However, some people will have an even balance of all 4 styles rather than all 3 styles. The VAK communication model is a tool that helps you in understanding the overall personality, preferences and strengths of the people you work with. Now, the thing about VAK and AD is this can be learned. So good coaches, good leaders, good trainers and good presenters are working with all the different senses, which is the visual, the auditory and the kinesthetic, which are the main senses we use in business. And then the auditory digital, which is the logical and processed. So that doesn't fit in with our natural senses. However, it gets used tremendously in business. And I'll be showing you a little bit about that in a moment. In the 1970s, Dr. Richard Bandler, the co-creator of NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, was the first person to notice that when people were talking, there was a pattern to the way their eyes moved. Our eyes move as we're searching for information. By observing the way someone's eyes move, we can get an indication of what dominant sense they are using. My advice for using eye access cues in business is become curious and start to notice the different eye movements and listen for the words being used. So I'm going to show you what it's like looking at a normal right-handed person. But what I do say for business, there's no need to go into, unless you're NLP trained and looking to elicit strategies, behavioural strategies from people. I like to keep it really, really simple. Eyes going up are visual, eyes going side to side are auditory, eyes going down to the right are kinesthetics, and eyes going down to the left are auditory digital or the process. Now, that is, I've talked about the eyes going up to your right. But when you're looking at someone, obviously you're seeing that in a different way. So for this person in this photograph, she's looking up, and she's looking up to her right, it's visual construct. Her left, visual recall. Her right, auditory construct. Her left, auditory recall. Her right, feelings. And then we've got the auditory digital. Just by watching and noticing where someone's eyes are going, you can get a huge indication of the way that they require to be communicated to. And you'll see people use a mix. Now, one thing that's really important to just talk about just now, sometimes we hear that people are either visual, auditory, kinesthetic. No, that's not true. People are using all of their senses, but they can have a predominant sense that they use more of. That can change with age, because very often in a lot of children, you'll find a lot of children, the predominant sense tends to be the visual to start with, and then the other senses develop. However, for coaching and leadership, you can develop your own way. So if you find you're predominantly visual, you can develop your auditory sense, you can develop your kinesthetic sense, and you can also develop your auditory digital sense. Obviously, we've got olfactory and gustatory. These don't tend to come in, that's your smell and taste. That doesn't tend to come in business so much, but it depends if I'm working with chemists or if I'm working with places where smell's very important, perfumery, then obviously we bring these senses in also. So visual eye access cues, when someone's looking up, they're in visual mode and seeing the situation. You match with visual words, for example, what do you see as the best option? How clear is that for you? Imagine this being finished. Show me what you mean. So you're actually using visual words, and this is to encourage the person you're talking to keep looking at the pictures that they're seeing. They're actually seeing visual images. And these images can be still or they can be moving. Very often, if someone is in a high visual preference, there's a lot of moving pictures. So there's a lot of fast thinking going on because pictures move very fast. Then when someone's auditory eye access cues, they are looking side to side. So the eyes are moving side to side and they're hearing the situation. Match with auditory words, for example, which solution sounds right to you? Let's discuss this in more detail. Tell me more. Let's have a chat about what we can do next. Now, the interesting thing about, especially if you're coaching or training someone or even leading someone who is a high auditory, think about the actual process that goes on here. Someone hears something being said from the outside world, and then in their inside world, they will listen to it again. Then they'll listen to their answer and they might go, no, they might talk to themselves, they might check and they might go, no, that's not the answer I need. And then they'll check for another answer. Meanwhile, in your world, watching them, you're losing the will to live because they haven't actually replied to you yet. And very often people can get impatient and they can start to butt in with another question or tell me more about this, or without giving that person the time to process their answer. Watch, as long as the clue that I give, because I train business coaches, the clue that I give in coaching, as long as your client or the person you're talking to's eyes are still moving, and that is called a transderivational search, when it's searching for all the information, the auditory, the visual, the auditory, or the kinesthetic information. As long as that's happening, they are in thinking mode. They're in processing mode. They're retrieving information. You're going to get a much more considered answer by letting someone take that time to think. Because people get frightened of silence. Leaders get frightened of silence. Coaches get frightened of silence. They feel embarrassed sitting there when someone's just not answered them. But when you really know this, you can sit there for as long as it needs. And then when you've got kinesthetic, when someone is looking down to their right, they're in feeling mode and feeling the kinesthetic. So kinesthetic in this situation just means feeling. And it can be feeling and touch. It's both feeling and touch. Use feeling words, for example, what feels like the best option for you? Are you comfortable with this solution? What is your gut instinct about this? And what could make this easier? And you'll hear things like, does that feel solid? Have you got a grip on that? How does it make you? Is this steadying you? Is it steadying your idea about things? And if someone's in a high kinesthetic mode, they might even they want to touch things. They want to demonstrate. You have to demonstrate things. Let them try things out from themselves. And then we have the auditory digital eye access cues. When someone's looking down to their left, they're in auditory digital mode, processing data, facts, and logic. Use logical analytic language. For example, can you outline the steps to take? What would be the best strategy to use? How will you organize this project? How will you prioritize tasks and goals? So you can see, even with the language that's getting used there, that is the language of business. Now, what we find in business, I've been working in this area for about 35 years. And previous to that, I was in corporate sales for over 20 years. Now, what is really interesting is when leaders in business get busy, very often they're bringing in more. They've got to deal with so much stuff that the senses drop out of their language and they start to move much more to process words. So, for example, you can have someone who's maybe quite high kinesthetic sends an email, and they're all in feelings and good relationships and everything. Hi, how are you doing? Oh, the weather's been absolutely fantastic. Isn't it great? We've had all this sunshine, no rain. And then they say, so have you finished this report? And then someone who's in a high auditory digital will look at that and go, whoa, there's too much information here. And then they'll go, what the adverb yet? And then they'll send an email back going, done. So you've actually communicated in two completely different languages. So the person who's high kinesthetic mode then goes, oh, they've fallen out with me. They start assuming all start, hi, are you okay? Very often when someone is in a high processing mode, one of the things that we use now is emojis, a little smiley face, done smiley face. That can be incredible for just helping someone feel, right, it's okay. It's fine. So you will get the processing jumps in a lot as people get really busy. And I think it's something that when people understand that, then they don't have the same communication breakdowns. So visual, how someone learns and comprehends through seeing, drawing and reading. People who have high visual preference often run movies in their head when remembering or storing information. When you communicate with visual preference clients or colleagues, it's best to make sure you show them what you're expecting for them so they can see what's required. Auditory, how someone learns and comprehends through listening and speaking. People with a high auditory preference take in information through sounds, remembering maybe like replaying a recording with original tones and words. When you communicate with auditory preference clients or colleagues, it's best to talk with them so they can hear words and instructions clearly. Now, where the auditory works in really is I run the NLP Business Circle Club, and our members get all the recordings of our masterclasses. They get the video recordings so they can see the recordings if they want, but they also get like a masterclass podcast, which is all the audio recordings of the videos. And the number of members that actually use the audios, they just prefer to listen to the audio because it's that you can, when you're in auditory preference, if you like, you can be doing other things while you're listening to that. So again, from a leadership point of view, sometimes accepting that people can learn easier listening to things. And it's just figuring out which is the best preference for you at that particular time. Then kinesthetic, how someone learns by touching and doing. People with high kinesthetic preference learn by doing. When you communicate with kinesthetic preferences, clients or colleagues, it's best to give handouts and books they can hold and write in and get them doing activities, and they learn with body movements. And then auditory digital, how someone learns through logic and reasoning, understand concepts through logical reasoning and analysis. When you communicate with auditory digital preferences clients or colleagues, it's best to provide explanations and instructions in a logical sequence that are clear, precise and well organised. They enjoy problem-solving activities and critical thinking exercises. So the VAK AD Communication Model, listen for the type of words someone is using more of: visual, auditory, kinesthetic or auditory digital. When you match these words back, you create a good rapport. So visual, I see what you mean. I get the picture. What's your view? Is this clear now? Engaged by using diagrams, charts and pictures. Auditory, that rings a bell. I hear what you're saying. That sounds okay. Tell me more. Engaged by telling stories, stressing keywords and anecdotes. Kinesthetic, that feels right. Do you grasp that? Are you happy with that? What's your gut feeling? What's your instinct? What's your self-telling? And then engaged by using hand-on tasks and physical activities. And then auditory digital, what do you think? What do you believe? How do you define that? How are the numbers? Engaged with facts, data, statistics and logic. I'm going to share 3 tips handout for you, just a 1-page handout. And if you want to just open that or download that. So actionable tip 1, match your language to their preferred style. When speaking with someone, listen for their sensory words. These indicate their preferred communication style: visual, auditory, kinesthetic or auditory digital. Now, what I said previously is people can change their style depending on context. So we're talking about the way you're communicating with that person at this point of time. This is why NLP skills, the calibration skills of NLP, the listening to what language people are using, because NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. So it's all based around how language influences behaviour. I remember years ago, I was staying with a friend of mine. I'd moved back from the Middle East. Now, this was 1990. And in the Middle East, we had brand new printing presses. So who remembers when you used to get newsprint on your fingers? Is anyone old enough to remember that? Once upon a time, your hands used to get filthy when you read a newspaper. So I had come back from the Middle East, and because it was new printing presses, I hadn't noticed, but for years I'd picked up newspapers and never got any black in my hands. So this friend I was staying with started to get really angry. And I said to this friend, I'm really sorry, what am I doing? I'm obviously doing something that's upsetting you. Can you help me understand? Because I don't understand what I'm doing. If you can't see it. And I went, no, I can't see it. I don't know. I don't understand. But I kept saying, I don't understand. I don't know. I don't want to upset you. How can I stop upsetting you? Can you hear these words are all kinesthetic-led words? So eventually I said, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to move out because this is not good, because we've got a good friendship, but this is going to collapse. She went, you mean that you don't know? You can't see what you're doing? I said, no. And she took me to her door, and it was a white door. And she looked at the door, she said, look at the state of my door. And there was nothing in her door. I said, I can't see it. That's because I'm wiping off your fingerprints. So she had been noticing my fingerprints, and she'd been wiping them off and getting angrier and angrier. Now, because at that time I was much more kinesthetic than I am now. There's quite a bit more visual now, but I was very kinesthetic. I wouldn't even have noticed fingerprints until they got to a certain stage. Then, oh, there's fingerprints there. How we do negative and positive hallucination. Sometimes you don't see dust until you go suddenly, oh God, look at all that dust. You all of a sudden see something. So because she was wiping them off, I couldn't see them. How could I have changed that? I could have changed that by asking a vet, because I wasn't aware. I knew about NLP at this time, but I wasn't aware of the impact of this. All I had to say was, can you show me what I'm doing? We were actually speaking two completely different languages. And it's interesting because I'm still very friendly with this person. And since I've done a lot of Zoom communication with that person, I hadn't realised how visual her eyes are up there all the time. You're talking to her eyes and she hardly looks at you. She's up there all the time. So it's just fascinating how that was just a simple situation in a personal situation, but how much lack of communication is happening in companies because of that. So let me just show you these tips. So match their style using similar language. Visual, I see what you mean. Auditory, that sounds good. Kinesthetic, that feels right. Auditory digital, let's think through this logically. And then action. During your next meeting or coaching session, note 3 sensory-based words they use and consciously mirror them to build rapport. So see if you can start to hear. Now, I know most people here tonight have experience of this, but those of you who are watching the recording, if this might be something that's completely new to you, and just start to listen for sensory-based words and notice what happens. And you actually, the trick is use the same words back to them. If you're busy racking your brains, if there's visual words, you go, what can I get for a visual word? Just repeat their words back to them. And then the tip 2, people's eye movements give clues about how they're processing information. For example, visual, side to side, visual up, looking up, side to side is auditory, down, kinesthetic, or auditory digital. Normally kinesthetics to the right, the person's right, auditory digital to the left. If someone is left-handed, that can be swapped. But there's a really cool thing to do with that though. If you've got a good idea, someone keeps looking down to their left, I challenge you to say to them, okay, so what are you saying to yourself? The number of times I have said that in a coaching session and they tell you what they're saying to themselves, then someone say, how did you know what I was saying? How did you know what I was saying? I said, oh, that's a coaching. It's one of the skills of coaching. But it's really cool to just play with that, to say what you're actually telling yourself, what you're saying. So looking up, what does that look like to you? Looking sideways, what does that sound like? Or how does that sound? Looking down, how do you feel about, or what's your gut saying? And then obviously for the auditory digital, if they're talking, so what's your system or what's your process for that? There's just a bit missing there. Action, start observing eye movement patterns in 3 conversations this week. And again, try matching these questions accordingly. So there's 2 ways to do this. You can listen out for the words, or you can look at the eye access cues. And for me, this is the easiest way to learn this, is do it step by step. And then actionable tip 3, design multi-sensory presentations. For presentation or training, incorporate elements for each VAK AD style. Visuals, make sure you've got charts, slides, diagrams, videos, everything that's all visual. Auditory, discussions, stories, Q&A. Kinesthetic, hands-on and tasks and physical materials. Auditory digital, clear, logical, structured steps, facts and data. Before your next workshop or presentation, review your content and add at least 1 activity or element for each learning preference. Thank you very much. I hope you've taken some tips from that. Have you all got the handout that I sent on the chat? Did you all download the handout? At the bottom of that, if anyone is looking, I'm actually taking on more coaching clients at the moment. If anyone would like to have a complimentary 30-minute strategy call with me, it's basically a clarity and strategy call where we can talk about either how I can help you or your organisation through coaching or training. Please feel free to book some time. And we'll see you on the 2nd Wednesday of June at 6 o'clock. No idea what the subject will be, but it will be all around communication, language and behaviour, because that's what we deal with. See you soon. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.
You.
Bye.
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 Thank you all for your time. It's my pleasure meeting all of you.
Okay, lovely to see you. Maybe we'll see you on the next one. Yeah, we're here every month. Okay, spread the word. Let people know.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you, dear. Bye-bye.